The judge slammed his gavel and shouted, "Shut up!" at the little girl in court. Ava froze but didn't sit. For a moment, everyone believed justice would crush her like so many others. But then, with trembling hands, she pressed play on a recording that would silence the powerful and shake the courtroom to its core. A billionaire's voice filled the air, and the judge, once cold and unshakable, began to cry. What secret could make a judge weep in front of a full courtroom? Want to know what happened? Watch until the end and don't miss this story full of emotion and shocking twists. Tell us which city you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Joan's Diner, casting golden squares across the worn linoleum floor. The scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls filled the air as Christine Parker balanced 3 plates along her forearm, a skill perfected over 6 years of waitressing. At 42, her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, laugh lines framing eyes that had seen more hard days than easy ones. "Order up!" called the cook, sliding a plate of blueberry pancakes across the counter. Christine reached for it, but her hand trembled slightly. Edward Falk, owner of the diner chain and self-proclaimed philanthropist with a carefully crafted public image, had just walked in through the back entrance. His presence always set her nerves on edge. The plate slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor with a crash that silenced the Sunday morning chatter. The ceramic pieces scattered like stars across the black and white tiles, a constellation of her embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," Christine whispered, kneeling to gather the shards. As she collected the broken pieces, memories flooded back of her shattered marriage, of the promise she'd made to her 8-year-old daughter Ava, that they would never again allow themselves to be humiliated by anyone. "Don't worry about it." Edward's voice was silk smooth as he approached, his expensive cologne announcing his presence before his shadow fell across her. When the last customer turned away, his hand slid across her arm in a touch that made her skin crawl. "Accidents happen to the careless." Christine pulled away, straightening her uniform. "Mr. Falk, I've asked you before." His smile vanished like a mask dropping. "You'll pay dearly for your continued insolence," he whispered, venom beneath the civility. "Remember who signs your checks, Christine." Hours later, as the afternoon shift ended, chaos erupted. Edward's college-age son Tyler collapsed in the parking lot, violently ill after eating a sundae. By nightfall, local news vans crowded outside the diner, their headlines already written, "Vengeful waitress poisons billionaire's heir." Christine watched in horror from her small apartment as her face flashed across the screen. Ava clutched her mother's hand, her small fingers ice-cold with fear. "Mom, are we in trouble?" "No, sweetie," Christine answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is just a mistake. The truth always comes out eventually." But as police sirens wailed in, the distance drawing closer to their apartment building, Christine wasn't so certain. In a town where the Falk name adorned hospital wings and community centers, would anyone believe a single mother, with nothing but her word against his? Cameras flashed like lightning as Christine walked up the courthouse steps Monday morning. Reporters thrust microphones toward her face, their questions hitting like stones. "Did you target the Falk family? Were you seeking revenge?" She clutched her purse tightly, eyes fixed on the imposing granite building ahead. Inside the mahogany-paneled corridor, Christine met her court-appointed attorney, a grey-haired man with bloodshot eyes who kept swallowing blood pressure pills. His hands trembled as he shuffled papers. "They're offering a deal," he whispered hoarsely. "Plead guilty to negligence, not attempted poisoning. 3 years probation, no jail time." "But I didn't do anything wrong," Christine protested. The attorney wiped sweat from his forehead. "You're up against Edward Falk. His friends fund half the judges in this district. The prosecutor is his golf buddy's daughter." Before Christine could respond, the attorney clutched his chest and collapsed. Paramedics rushed in as she stood frozen, watching them wheel away her only defender. "Mrs. Parker." A young man approached, his brown eyes kind beneath slightly disheveled black hair. "I'm Daniel Ruiz, public defender. I've been assigned to your case." "They'll just find a way to take you down too," Christine murmured. Daniel straightened his modest tie. "I don't scare easily, and I don't believe you poisoned anyone." What Christine couldn't know was that Daniel had pawned his late father's guitar that very morning, a cherished Gibson he'd promised never to sell, to pay for an independent toxicology analysis. At 28, burdened with student loans and a leaking apartment ceiling, he couldn't afford to fund the defense himself. Yet something about Christine's case had struck a chord of injustice he couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, at home, little Ava explored the tablet her grandmother Nora had sent from Kansas last Christmas. Between games and photos, she discovered an audio recording from weeks earlier. The tablet had been in her backpack at the diner. accidentally, capturing Edward Falk's voice. "I'll sue you until you don't have a tip to your name." Ava clutched her stuffed bear, trembling. She'd heard about spying on TV shows. Was she in trouble too? With tears streaming down her face, she called Grandma Nora. "Sweetheart," the old seamstress comforted her, "sometimes the strongest quilts are made from scraps that nobody wanted. Your recording isn't trash, it's truth. And truth, however small, has power." Judge Benjamin Harper's courtroom awaited them the next morning, a man known for his thunderous voice and uncompromising demeanor. The headlines had already convicted Christine, and Falk's legal team filled the front row with polished suits and predatory smiles. Memorial Day arrived with patriotic trumpets echoing down Main Street. American flags fluttered from every lamppost as veterans marched in formation. Daniel Ruiz stood watching the parade, his phone vibrating in his pocket. "Mr. Ruiz, this is Martin Henderson from Silverman & Associates in Manhattan." The voice exuded wealth and confidence. "We're impressed with your handling of the Parker case. Our firm would like to offer you a position, starting salary 3 times what you're making now." "That's generous," Daniel replied cautiously. "All we ask is that you hand off the Parker matter to someone else. It's becoming a distraction and, frankly, a professional liability for someone with your potential." Daniel's fingers tightened around the business card. His apartment ceiling leaked, student loans loomed, and his father's pawned guitar haunted his dreams. Yet he glanced across the street where Christine stood, watching the parade with Ava, their faces momentarily peaceful, despite tomorrow's trial. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm seeing this case through," he said, tearing the card in half. What he didn't know was that Christine had witnessed the exchange from afar, mistaking his hesitation for temptation. The seed of doubt planted itself in her heart. Her phone rang, the bank calling about missed mortgage payments. The stress rekindled the gastritis she'd been managing with black coffee and determination. Walking back to the diner to retrieve forgotten paperwork, she arrived just as the assistant chef burned his forearm on a hot oven. "Here," she said, gently applying ice to his wound and bandaging it with supplies from the first aid kit. "You should visit the community clinic. They won't ask too many questions." The young man nodded gratefully, a moral debt forming in his eyes. That evening, Daniel filed a motion to authenticate the audio recording Ava had discovered. The prosecutor immediately countered with a motion to suppress, claiming the chain of custody was compromised. Judge Harper scheduled a technical hearing for Tuesday morning, the same day as the trial. "Can they do that?" Christine asked, dark circles under her eyes betraying her sleepless nights. "It's irregular," Daniel admitted, "but Judge Harper owes Falk a favor." Grandmother Nora arrived from Kansas that night, bringing with her a handmade quilt that told the Parker family story in stitches and fabric. She hugged Ava tightly. "Remember what I told you about quilts? Each piece may seem fragile alone, but together, bound with love and truth, they become stronger than the finest silk. Tomorrow, we stand together." Tuesday morning dawned with storm. Clouds gathering over Jersey City's courthouse. The ancient building stood silent, witness to countless human dramas, its stained glass windows filtering sunlight into rainbow patterns across the worn oak benches. Judge Benjamin Harper entered. Precisely at 9, his black robe billowing behind him like thunderclouds. At 73, his face was a map of deep valleys and sharp ridges, eyes that had seen 40 years of human failings peering over half-moon glasses. "This court will come to order," he announced, voice reverberating off marble walls. The technical hearing began with a cybercrime officer methodically explaining digital forensics to the jury. Terms like hash verification and metadata integrity floated through the courtroom as he confirmed the authenticity of Ava's recording. In layman's terms, Daniel clarified for the jury, "It's impossible to alter this audio without leaving evidence of tampering." Edward Falk shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit. During a brief recess, he approached Ava in the hallway where she sat with Grandma Nora. "What a bright young lady," he said, voice honeyed with false kindness. "Did you know I fund a special scholarship program? Children like you could attend any private school, all expenses paid." His eyes darted to the tablet tucked under her arm. "All I need is that little device of yours. A fair trade, wouldn't you say?" Ava clutched the tablet tighter, backing away until she was pressed against her grandmother's quilt-draped lap. Meanwhile, Christine's stomach knotted with pain. The prosecutor displayed sanitization reports allegedly showing toxic residues in the diner kitchen. Daniel split the screen to reveal metadata, showing recent modifications to the files on Falk's laptop. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, but Judge Harper's gavel crashed down. "Unless you have incontrovertible proof, Mr. Ruiz, we'll proceed with the evidence at hand." Just then, the bailiff entered with a sealed envelope delivered to the court clerk. The assistant chef from Jones' Diner, grateful for Christine's kindness with his burn, had sent his own copy of the audio directly to the court registry. Two independent sources of the same recording nullified any accusations of fabrication. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Falk's attorney requested another recess. "Denied," said Judge Harper. "The recording will be played for the court." That's when little Ava stood up, tablet held high despite her trembling hands. "Sit down and be quiet, little girl." Judge Harper thundered, his gavel striking with authority that echoed through the hushed chamber. But Ava Parker, courage flowing from her grandmother's quilt wrapped around her small shoulders, remained standing, turquoise sneakers barely touching the ground, tears balanced precariously on her eyelashes. She faced the judge with determination that belied her 8 years. Silence fell across the courtroom like first snow, delicate yet absolute. Every eye turned to the small figure refusing to sit down despite the judge's command. Daniel Ruiz quickly rose to his feet. "Your Honor, under New Jersey's single-party consent law, the minor child is legally permitted to present evidence she personally recorded," he stated firmly. Judge Harper's lips tightened into a thin line. Something flickered across his weathered features. A memory, perhaps, of another time when power had silenced truth. After a long moment, he nodded curtly. "Proceed, counselor, but be brief." Daniel guided Ava to the witness stand, where she placed her tablet on the wooden ledge. Her small finger, steady now with purpose, pressed play. Edward Falk's voice filled the courtroom, unnervingly clear. "Listen carefully, Christine. Cross me again, and I'll make sure you and your brat never work in this state again. That food poisoning incident? Just a taste of what I can arrange. Now smile and serve the customers like a good little waitress." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Falk's face drained of color as he recognized his own words, threats spoken when he believed no one was listening. That's taken out of context," he sputtered, but the damage was done. The jury members exchanged glances, their expressions hardening against the man they'd initially sympathized with. Judge Harper stared at Falk with new eyes, remembering the charity gala years ago when the businessman had publicly humiliated him over his modest judicial salary. "The recording appears authentic," Judge Harper declared. "Motion to suppress denied." He turned to the district attorney. "Given this new evidence, does the prosecution wish to proceed with charges against Mrs. Parker?" The prosecutor, avoiding Falk's glare, stood reluctantly. "The state withdraws its case, Your Honor." Judge Harper nodded, then did something unexpected. He removed his glasses, revealing eyes that had suddenly grown moist. "This court finds the allegations against Christine Parker to be without merit," he announced, voice wavering slightly. "Furthermore, I am authorizing a civil proceeding against Edward Falk for harassment and evidence tampering." The gavel fell with finality. Judge Harper looked directly at Ava, who had started to tremble with relief. "Young lady," he said, his voice gentler than anyone in that courtroom had ever heard, "this court owes you an apology. Your courage today has reminded an old judge why he first put on this robe." A tear escaped, rolling down his lined cheek as decades of professional stoicism cracked. Sometimes justice arrives in the smallest packages. News cameras captured the moment as Christine embraced her daughter, their silhouettes framed by the courthouse columns. Headlines transformed overnight. "Child's voice topples billionaire's empire," replaced accusations of poisoning. The story went viral, with social media users calling Ava the girl who stood up. Victory, however, came with its own price tag. Christine needed to sell her beloved Oldsmobile, the last gift from her father, to cover the remaining expert witness fees. Some regular customers avoided Jones' Diner, fearing association with scandal. School became challenging for Ava, as classmates teased her about being on television, until her teacher displayed Grandma Nora's quilt in class and delivered a lesson on courage. Daniel reclaimed his father's pawned guitar, now bearing a pawnshop receipt taped to its case, a reminder of sacrifice and principles that money couldn't buy. The instrument's neck had developed a slight warp during its time away from home. "Some things bend but don't break," he told Christine when she noticed him gently testing the strings. 1 week after the trial, Christine received an unexpected call. The Rose and Coffee Book Club, a group of retired women who discussed legal thrillers every Thursday at the diner, had organized a community fundraiser to help with her legal expenses. "You always remember how each of us takes our tea," explained Margaret, the 82-year-old club president. "And you never rush us when we stay past closing discussing our novels. This town owes you kindness in return." The elderly women also offered practical advice. "Smile at the jury like you're serving apple pie," they'd suggested before her testimony, a decades-tested trick of empathy that had indeed softened several jurors' expressions. Daniel saw opportunity in this support network. With the book club's backing, he converted the diner's unused storage room, where a rusted jukebox had gathered dust, into an evening legal clinic. Every Tuesday and Thursday after dinner service, he provided free consultations to delivery drivers, veterans and single parents facing their own Goliaths. Christine hung a new sign behind the counter: employee health coverage, funded by part of the settlement she'd negotiated with Falk's attorneys. The assistant chef who had sent the corroborating evidence received promotion to head cook. Grandma Nora's quilt, now adorned with newspaper clippings about the case, hung on the opposite wall. Beneath it stood an acrylic display case containing Ava's tablet, protected by colorful duct tape repairs, with a small placard reading, "Small object, big voice." Autumn painted Jersey City in amber and gold as life settled into new rhythms. The diner gradually regained its clientele, with some customers requesting Ava's table, the booth beneath the quilt wall that had become something of a local landmark. Tourists occasionally stopped by, hoping to meet the girl from the news. Christine's gastritis improved as stress subsided. She began taking evening classes at the community college, accounting skills that would help her manage the diner's books more efficiently. The hours were long, but purpose replaced exhaustion. Daniel visited regularly, both as the Tuesday night legal clinic coordinator and, increasingly, as a friend whose smile brightened Christine's day. Their relationship evolved slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than dramatic passion. "Mom, is Mr. Ruiz your boyfriend now?" Ava asked one evening as they walked home. Christine blushed. "He's a good friend who helped us when we needed it most." Grandma Nora says sometimes the strongest threads in a quilt aren't the prettiest ones, they're the ones that hold everything together when it matters. One rainy Thursday, Judge Harper entered the diner incognito, his judicial robes exchanged for a weathered raincoat. He sat in a corner booth, ordered coffee and apple pie, and left a generous tip. Before departing, he paused at the quilt display, touching the fabric gently, as if completing some personal circle of redemption. When Christine approached, he simply said, "My wife made quilts before she passed. Always told me they were metaphors for justice, individual pieces finding harmony in the whole." The encounter made local news when another customer recognized him, adding another dimension to the story that continued to inspire. Letters arrived from across the country, many from grandparents sharing stories with their grandchildren about standing up for truth. Ava's teacher developed a classroom project where students created paper quilts representing moments of courage in their own lives. The school board initially resisted what some called a political statement, but relented when 3 grandmothers from the Rose and Coffee Book Club attended the meeting, knitting needles, clicking rhythmically during their persuasive speeches. About civic education, Edward Falk's restaurant empire suffered as franchisees distanced themselves. He launched a public relations campaign claiming rehabilitation, donating to children's causes with great fanfare, but the community remembered how truth had arrived, not through his charitable gestures, but through a child's determination and a grandmother's wisdom about quilts that hold together under pressure. Copper-hued sunlight bathed the diner on its 1-year anniversary of what locals now called the verdict. Christine had transformed the space into something more than a restaurant. It had become a community anchor. Veterans gathered for weekly coffee meetings, single parents exchanged childcare tips over lunch, and evening legal clinics expanded to 3 nights weekly. Grandma Nora relocated permanently to Jersey City, renting the apartment above the Flower Shop next door. Her sewing circles attracted both young mothers and retirees, teaching quilting techniques, while sharing wisdom that transcended generations. "Some people think getting older means becoming invisible," she told a reporter from the local paper. "But age is just more thread on your spool, more color to work with, more pattern to share." Judge Harper announced his retirement that spring, his final opinion citing the Parker case as a reminder that justice sometimes speaks through the most unexpected voices. He accepted a part-time position teaching ethics at the law school where Daniel had once struggled to pay tuition. Ava, now 9, developed an interest in journalism, interviewing diner customers for a school podcast called Small Voices, Big Stories. Her first guest was Margaret from the Rose and Coffee Book Club, who recounted marching for women's rights in the 1960s. On a crisp Saturday morning, Daniel finally played his father's restored guitar at the diner's weekend music hour. The notes resonated through the space, blending with conversation and laughter. Christine watched from behind the counter, a quiet happiness warming her face. After his set, Daniel approached with a small box. "My dad always said music mends what words can't reach," he explained, opening it to reveal a handcrafted wooden plaque for the wall, where broken pieces make beautiful patterns, inscribed beside a carving of a quilt square. As they hung it, beside Nora's fabric masterpiece, Ava tugged her mother's sleeve. "Look who's here," she whispered. Edward Falk stood awkwardly at the entrance, humbled by bankruptcy proceedings and community ostracism. His expensive suit replaced by department store clothes, he clutched a worn envelope. "I came to apologize," he said simply, "and to return this." Inside was the deed to the diner, signed over to Christine free of encumbrances. She accepted it with dignity rather than triumph. "Would you like some coffee on the house?" Their conversation lasted 1 hour, about second chances, about the weight of actions, about the long road of redemption. When he left, Christine didn't share the details with curious customers. Some threads she'd learned from Nora's quilting wisdom were best kept beneath the surface, holding the pattern together without needing to be seen. That evening, as fireflies danced outside the windows, Daniel's guitar case rested beside Christine's cash register, 2 broken journeys finding harmony in shared purpose. Sometimes, justice arrives in thunderous declarations, but healing comes in quiet moments stitched together one day at a time.